Oofda. Well, welcome back. Another day, another dollar. Got a little bit of stuff done off camera just to catch up, kind of those hour here and there where you can't really set everything up. But got a lot of stuff ready to go back on the rig, so it's going to be a lot of assembly today. Got some paint work done. There was the last couple pieces of Cygnus white. Got the gas tank cover blasted and painted. Got the trans tunnel. You might be able to see it hanging in the back there. And the spare tire carrier. Those are the last three pieces that needed to get the body color white. I do have to do the hard top in the corner. That needs the sand, and then it's going to get painted a white. But there's kind of a fiberglass dealio there that you got to deal with. So it's last. But otherwise, I did blast the gas tank as well, but it had some rust kind of where stuff got in by the filler neck. So I ended up just ordering a new one. Oddly enough, you can get them new from Toyota still. Came in 3 to 4 days, which was pretty darn good for a pretty weird part. So I got a new gas tank that's going to go in, and then we can start jamming forward kind of from the steering column and dash. I blew apart the steering column, got that all painted, so we can jam that back together, get the steering column in, get the fuel tank in. Should be able to theoretically bleed the brakes and clutch. And then if you've got a steering wheel, brakes, and clutch, it should at least be a mover, which will be kind of nice to get it in and out of the shop versus using the old Armstrong method. And then we should be sitting pretty good. A lot of just little stuff to run, but a lot of the fiddly work of getting it prepped and painted is done. So anywho, enough yakking. Let's get cracking and see how far we can get on getting this thing closer to driving. This is just the old gas tank. As you can see, it's actually in pretty good shape. It was replaced somewhere along the lines, I don't know what year it was. Bottom is pretty good. There was a little bit of light surface rust around that opening in the floor. But what got this one is this corner here. Basically right where the filler neck opener door is, it was rotted out on the tub, and I think salt and corrosion from the road got in there behind that filler neck opening door, and it basically rotted out this corner of the gas tank. It's actually pretty patchable, and I may come back and just patch this up and keep it as a spare or move it down the road for somebody who needs a good tank. They are a little bit fiddly to find, not terrible. You can still get them from Uncle Toyota. So this is an OEM tank. You can see the Toyota box underneath it. Got some interesting markings on the side. I'm assuming that's a Japanese character. These two, it's probably the inspection marks. Kind of interesting that it came off the line back in 17, so March 21st of 17. So obviously they kind of do a run and then stack them up. They did make these cruisers for quite a while. So it's not surprising that they still made them. Got a little bit of run in their paint. Naughty. It's just a gas tank. Interesting that they kind of use that older cellophane kind of tape too to cover up the holes. But it is the same tank. It's got our 3 evap lines that come dingling out. Filler neck's the same. And it's got the same vent tube. Should be a drop-in. And like I said, got the gas tank cover all nice and shiny. She's painted good to go. It is funny, you kind of get used to having things open. You don't realize just how short the foot space is. You know, you're used to seeing it open like that and you kind of think the seats are back further, but really they come pretty darn close up front. So there's not as much room in these old rigs as you think. So I'm going to pull that guy out. I do have got to do some work underneath to get it prepped. We can drop that tank in and then start to fiddle on those fuel lines. As you can see, got the different sizes I'll need to get that evap stuff run. I think, unfortunately, I missed it along the way. I was going to go check and see exactly. I think the evap system comes out of the tank, those 3 hoses. There should be a hole in this corner that lets the run down and comes up front to an evap canister, charcoal canister that sits on the fender. Unfortunately, as you can tell, there is no hole here. So they kind of missed the boat there. It may be a result of, I think this is like got a weird hybrid of it's not quite right for a 76 because the spare tire carrier was off. So this may be more of a 78 kind of tub. I don't know when they moved the gas tank underneath though, because that's the other dividing line, is when the gas tank used to be under the passenger seat, kind of went under the body instead of in the cabin. But anyway, we're going to have to poke a hole. We'll touch up the paint. It's not a big deal. It's going to be under all the covers and stuff. It's more of a corrosion thing. It's nice to not drill holes in clean metal, but we'll get there. It's just one little hole to let that evap line go down and run up the body. So we'll get you guys set up. We'll move some of this stuff out of the way and start plunking along, getting fuel in, one step closer to having her be a runner. Alrighty, just going to yank this guy out. He was just sitting there as a place to keep him. Yoink. Got a few crumbs under there. So other than cleaning up our crumbs, we had to push it outside when we painted the extra parts. So there's a little bit of crust from the oak trees that kind of fell down. For the few hours it was outside. Doesn't take long. But we'll dust that out of there. From the factory they had kind of rubber pieces that the tank sat on. Will you get out of the way? Basically they had one on this dingle and then they had one in each corner, I believe, just to kind of support it. I could probably just put it in each corner. That seems to be the way they do it. That leaves these channels open for anything that kind of runs through. It is a little bit of a weird setup because you got an air gap. And then you do get a little bit of road grunge trapped up in here, which can be a bit of a problem. I'm not going to drive it in the winter, so I'm not too worried about it. But it wasn't a super friendly design for ye olde Wisconsin up here. I do have some hard foam, kind of like a mouse pad. It's a high density neoprene from when I did the heater box. There's a big flap on there that has foam like this on it. Stop honking, guy. So I'm going to cut off some stripes. It's actually probably a pretty good width for what we need. So just cut off some 1.5 to 2-inch strips for each corner. So I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Dunk that tank in there, and then we can start rooting around on some hoses. So. I'm just adding a couple little extra smaller tabs kind of on the midway on these longer runs just to give her a little extra support. I left them short just to keep those channels open in case anything does need to run through there. Realistically, she should stay pretty clean. But. Well, I think you can see it. Tucked on, at least clipped on the fitting for the fuel feed. So this is the feed to the carb, which would be the EFI now. This one on this end is the fuel return. I just tucked this guy on there because he's a little harder to get to once it's sitting in there. This one's going to be out in the open, but they got to run down through the floor. But otherwise, we got our little rubber snubbers in there. Should be able to get out of the way, hose. Boingada boingada. Hey, we got gas tank. Boy, that takes up some space. So there she's sitting where it's supposed to. Basically there's your hole through the floor. That's got to come down. So this return line got to swoop through there. Oops, swoop through there. Or that feed line, this return line's got to run down there as well. They basically have a 90-degree hard line elbow, so I'm going to bend a new one up out of the fuel line I've got, put a couple flanders on it. But they just have that to help avoid kinking that line, so it's just it's a weird setup. It's funny that they didn't just put the elbow on the tank to run that way instead of being all goofy, but it is what it is. Yeah, that's where she's going to sit. So we'll make up that bend. Then we can tuck on the other piece of line. It's going to go off of this guy. They both got to make it down underneath. And then we got to use a little bit extra of that line to run a couple short runs to the evap canister that sits somewhere up here. I guess we can measure these lines. Try and nibble off what we need. So put you back in the rack. Keep chipping away at those lines. And then I've dunked the sender in as well, so we don't forget about that. Boop, back you go. Wink. Alrighty, back in your home you go. Wiggle, wiggle. It was just easier to pull the tank back out and get that fitting on the line because she was a little snug. This guy should fit in there, unless that opening is wrong, which you never know. Don't think. So he'll fit in where he needs to go, which is fine. But I don't think wherever he is, he fit where he needs to go. Probably not. The good thing is it's just a split grommet, so I'm not too worried about that. Get in your hole. There you go. And we'll deal with that other fella underneath. So he just needs a short little run here. Those need to be sharper. Boink. So I had been kind of standing on that side of the rig putting that tank in, and I didn't quite notice how far the tank shot over towards the middle, so there is a little bit of an overlap with that trans tunnel cover. I'm going to see if we can dunk that in. It's all painted. I got some heat shield underneath it as well as the original heat shield on top. Got some gasketry around it. Should be able to just dunk her on. You can get under the tub or the tank coming from this way. Worst case, I think we can just kind of prop it up with a little bit of something soft like this. Excuse me. Which I might just do that to begin with. But otherwise, I think should have put the tunnel in first. One of those things. Yeah, I think you gotta come out. So pulled the tank back out, pulled the trans cover back off. I had originally kind of gave this a quick test fit, and I thought you could at least get some pinch out of that trans tunnel. Unfortunately you can't, and because they were a ½ inch off on their dimensions, all these captive nuts are pushed ½ inch the wrong way. The firewall fits, so at least I'm workable there. The unfortunate part is you've got captive nuts welded on under here, so if you poke a new hole, I don't know that we're going to fit another nut underneath real well. This one I can poke through because the captive nut already burned off. Same way with this one, so luckily those two are out. This one I think we can get a hole through. I kind of just picked a side so you can at least get that side to line up. You know, you can kind of slide it one way or the other. And then these back two are off. So unfortunately we're going to have to poke a couple more holes in that fresh paint. But I don't see any other way forward. You can't really bend the tunnel that far. I tried to flex it a little bit. She's pretty tight. They do have this radius wrong as well. It's not flexed right. So I did get a little bit of a rub mark there in trying to get everything to fit. So I'm going to get the drill bit that fits these M6s. I think they're an M6. Try moving these holes outward, which I mean that matches up with the ½ inch that this whole tub was off. Basically these floor pans were screwed up from the rockers back, B-pillars. I think I talked about it in the prior video a little bit. I kind of skirted it a little bit, but yeah, the snowball effect just kind of keeps coming back to bite you. But luckily this is all kind of under the floor pan, so it's not super critical. But it is making it a little bit harder just to fit something that should be pretty simple. Putting the trans cover on is kind of going to be an all afternoon affair. Let's see what we got there. I'm trying to feel underneath how far the nut clears. If we can get a hole there, we'll at least kind of be in the ballpark. I think we can get obviously the firewall ones all fit. And you can kind of get lucky on some of these front ones. But yeah, all the dimensions are kind of off here. Same way I had to move the seat. Had to move the seat post because it was off by a ½ inch. I had to move these fittings for the tub. So there's just kind of weird stuff that it snowballed like I figured. But I'm going to snag the drill, going to give it one last look before we start poking holes. And then past that, I think that's what we're going to have to do. So, onward. Wink. Alrighty. Re-drilled those holes. Should have room for a nut underneath. I think we're just going to leave the originals. Tuck the weather strip back down. Should be able to dunk it in, kind of get her close, work her in. See how we do. Well, I brought you back after. She was a little bit back and forth and up, down, kind of under the rig, above the rig. There is a reason these are captive nuts. It's because you can't get two hands on them without two people, and it is just me here. So I ended up having to drill out this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. Oop, he needs to get snugged up. And this guy. The rest kind of coming up on the firewall were okay. And I managed to get them at least to line up coming down this side back to about here. So about half our captive nuts. These you can at least reach your mitts underneath and kind of do the maker both ways. These two in the back are the ones that are kind of futzy. So if the tunnel ever has to come off, it's going to be kind of fun. Plus these two up here, the reason this one's loose is because the transfer case is real snug here. There's not a lot of room to get your mitts up there. They're all stainless, so they should come apart pretty well. So I'm not too worried about bolts getting corroded. If that ever does have to come back out, I'd probably recruit a second person just to help wrangle those nuts underneath. Obviously with everything in paint, you can't really do the zap for a captive nut. Might have been able to do a riv nut, but I think because they were so close, I left their captive nuts that are welded on there was just enough room to squirt a nut right next to it. So I think a riv nut, because you need a bigger hole, I don't think you would have been able to press one in there. And those are kind of problematic in themselves. There is a little bit of a gap right here where their dimple in the floor pan doesn't match the layout of the trans tunnel. That is a factory trans tunnel. It even still has the factory heat shielding stuff on there. It came out pretty good. But otherwise, I did do that EDPM, the rubber automotive, just kind of generic weather strip. I ran that around the trans hole. I tried putting it on the tunnel, but it did not want to stick on there for some reason. When you're handling it, it's hard to do. It was easier to stick it to the floor pan. You can kind of see it when I throw the tunnel on. It's easier to stick it to the floor pans, and there's a little bit more of a lip there to play with. When you look from underneath, it seals it up nice and snug, so that worked out pretty good. They had like a tar, kind of that goofy tar tape, those coil snakes, basically that goop in a snake originally, but you know, it's kind of nice to use something a little bit better. Anywho, trans tunnel's on. I think we're sitting pretty good there. I just got to catch this nut. You can hear it. The washer's loose. I just got to reach my mitts under there and give her a zap. Otherwise, I think the rest of them are snugged up, so we're sitting pretty good there. These are for the heat pipes. I'll probably dunk the cover on and just see what sort of room we have running those heater pipes back to the rear. Hopefully we can run those after, because I'm waiting on some replacement heat shield for them. Basically, they had like an old foam covering on them to help keep the heat in and keep you from burning yourself. And I got some replacements there, but otherwise they kind of run down from this hole, come down, split. One goes into the heater core that sits here, and then there's two pipes that run back to the rear heater that sits on the floor. Hopefully we can dunk the gas tank in and get fuel up to the where it belongs again, and then run those after the fact. But let's see. So it's hard to tell with the cover, so I'm going to dunk the tank itself back in. The heater hoses, they run lower to this hole and then I think above this one. So it is a little bit weird to get your mitts in there. I was going to drop the tank in and see. The cover is a little bit closer, but the cover has some room for the tank. So I think we may be able to at least get the tank in, then you can run the fuel lines. Because, yeah, she's a little tight. Unfortunately, I'm stuck waiting on parts. Basically, you got this nut right here by my thumb. You got to get in there. It's got a strap that holds two heater hoses that run back, and that's a little bit tight. This guy can sit there. It's not going to hurt anything. Easy enough to pop out. Once the filler neck's on, actually it's easy to take it out with the filler neck attached. So I didn't expect that, but it is what it is. We'll let that ride. Probably shuffle over and start working on the steering column. I've got that all in pieces over on the bench. We can start to put that together and then jam that back through. So we got that going. I think we'll put the steering box on first because they kind of made up together. So we can dump the steering box on and then dump the steering column in. It's probably our next bet, because until we have those heater hose covers, can't run those heater hoses, which means you can't run the fuel tank. And until you've got that, can't put it in the, can't really do anything more on the firewall. So I think that's our next best bet, is shuffle over, start working on that steering column, and then we can work on at least the steering pedal, steering column, and then the gas pedal, get that throttle linkage done. So that'll be our plan for today. Shifting gears, but we'll make progress. Heave. Whoops. So not a whole lot to this guy other than needs to go on. There's two studs You drop it on, then there's two bolts that go on the other side. And boink. Everything clears as expected. I don't know where she is. She's on full right. So if you do half turn, 1 turn, half turn, 2 turns, half turn, 3 turn, half turn, 4 turn, half turn, 5 turn, 5 1/4. So 1, 2, 2 1/2. Alrighty, got a nice clean steering column. It got a blasting and a coat of paint like everything else. There's a little rubber gasket that goes on the firewall. He needs to snake through there. He will kind of stay put because of the shape of it. This guy goes on top, although I think I'm going to try and get these guys started. Yeah. Yeah. Yep, colors match. Blink. That's at least one. I believe the other one shoots down the other side, so that's the turn signals. But that's a start. We got the cover, the turn signal stock thing, and the wheel and tucked away. We'll go snag that. Ooh, you guys tipped over a little bit. And we'll get that dunked on. So before we dunk the steering wheel on, because that kind of takes up a little bit of room, kind of put the e-brake assembly back in. It's got 3 little studs that should seat up on the firewall. And then there's just 2 little bolts that should let him float here for now until I can get my mitts on the other side. And then I got the actual cable snuck around. I don't recall if you need to hook the cable on first or second. It probably doesn't matter. There she is, wrangled around on the back side. So this guy has to come up. There's a little dog up on the handle, and then this guy rides in a pivot. And then that's your adjustment point for how snug it should be. And this is the little switch for the light. Which one he plugs into, I'm not sure. This guy has a pair of greens. I would wager it's one of those two because that's over there, but I don't know. Where's the pictures? I don't know if you can see it, but it is the brown clip with the 2 red wires. The green one actually went to the full throttle switch. They had a little plate here that when you went full throttle it would do something with the emissions computer. Since we got the Holly, not going to do anything anymore, but at least we know which one needs to go to this guy. And then we know that green guy is just going to hang out. which is fine. You do that, green guy. That's about all she's gonna have. Time to root around in here. I don't think I can get you guys in here, but he should clip on top. So the service manual says it should have anywhere from 7 to 12 clicks. Right, we got a little bit of snugging up to do, but right now she's right about 9, which is kind of right in the middle. A little bit more. One, two, three, four, five, six, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I will probably need to adjust that switch. There's a little, it's kind of a weird little setup. So if you look when you pull the handle, this rocks and lets that switch out. This little guy tips. Not a lot, and that's why that switch is finicky. What it does is it drives you've got your brake light, your brake on light over here. Until I got juice hooked up and everything plugged in, I can't do much. But that's one last thing to do. I don't think he's too complicated. It's just a lock nut and you spin the switch, so should be pretty good there. But we got an e-brake. Brake and clutch pedals are in. Got to snug up that boot on the bottom for that e-brake grommet. It's just a 10 mil. I'm waiting on drain hoses. They come from that bucket that doesn't do anything. They used to have a cowl vent where you'd pull a cable inside and it would open up and you'd get wind through there. Apparently they had a bunch of cowls stamped out, so that one's just glued shut. That's what they did. But they still had to have the drains, unfortunately, or she holds water. They were kind of all rotted out. They come from that nugget there and run down to the trans tunnel. Don't think I can get my mitts up in there once the heater's on, because the heater hoses go here. So I think we're stuck waiting on those, and we're waiting on that heat fire shield to get everything kind of going this way back. But because of that, I think I may leave the dash cluster out, just so you can reach your mitts in here for like the heater hose, stuff like that. We'll see. Depends how far I get on other things. Well, Mike from the future here in the editing room again. Had to jump around a little bit at this point. So that's where we're going to leave it here for today. Some of the parts availability stuff was an interesting one, kind of bonked me a little bit on the head. I did debate on cutting it out and jumping forward a little bit just to cut out that noise, but it is kind of a good one in terms of a heads up for anyone doing their assembly, some of the little gotchas that might catch you. The rear heater lines were a funny one where I knew that sleeving and jacketing was on order, and I thought you could kind of get some of the other stuff in around it, but reality is you're probably better off waiting and getting those in. So that's one of those little items that you'd think is, well, a little item that is kind of more critical in terms of order of getting stuff back together. But it is what it is. It was still good to get the trans tunnel in, get the steering column buttoned up. Next up will be the Sniper, rest of that install. It'll be getting some of the brackets and linkages done, getting some of the stuff like the CDI box mounted and tidying up that wire loom. So I think that'll be the next one. There's a little bit of hopping around on that one as well, but I think that's where we'll be. And then after that, we should be able to get the interior in, and then it's kind of real close to running and driving. But anyway, thanks for riding along. Hopefully that helps for anybody who's maybe doing some assembly. Otherwise, we'll catch you on the next one. See you.